The war didn't begin with an explosion. It didn't start with a massive fleet or a dramatic speech. It started quietly. So quietly that no one noticed when it crossed the point of no return. For decades, the Velkari Dominion and the Orinth Collective had existed in an uneasy balance. They were the two largest powers in that side of the galaxy. Different in every way. The Velkari believed in strength, control, expansion through force. The Orinth believed in order, precision, control through intelligence and energy manipulation. They weren't friends, but they weren't enemies either. Not officially. Their borders touched across several star systems rich in rare resources, energy crystals, unstable elements, things both sides needed to grow stronger. At first, it was simple competition. Mining rights, trade disputes, minor disagreements handled through diplomacy. But over time, the tension grew. Velkari ships started showing up closer to Orinth space. Orinth probes began scanning Velkari systems. Small violations. Nothing serious. Nothing worth war. Until one day, a Velkari mining station was destroyed. No survivors. No clear cause. Just debris. The Velkari blamed the Orinth immediately. You crossed the line, their war council declared. The Orinth denied it. We had no involvement, they said. But the damage was done. A few days later, an Orinth research vessel vanished. No signal. No wreckage. Nothing. This time, the Orinth blamed the Velkari. And just like that, the galaxy took its first step toward war. At first, both sides tried to control it. Limited strikes. Small-scale attacks. Careful movements. But war doesn't stay small for long. A Velkari fleet attacked an Orinth supply route. The Orinth responded by destroying a Velkari outpost. Each side believed they were reacting, defending, responding to aggression. But in reality, they were escalating. Within weeks, the conflict spread across multiple systems. What started as a misunderstanding became a full-scale war. Planets were evacuated. Stations abandoned. Trade routes collapsed. The galaxy watched. And then, the galaxy chose sides. Smaller empires aligned themselves with the Velkari, hoping to gain power through strength. Others supported the Orinth, trusting their advanced technology and structured command. Some joined out of fear. Some out of opportunity. Some simply to survive. Because in a war like this, staying neutral was dangerous. If you're not with us, one Velkari commander said, then you're against us. The Orinth had a different version. If you do not stand with order, they declared, you stand in the way of it. Different words. Same meaning. Join, or be destroyed. And one by one, civilizations made their choice. Fleets grew larger. Battles became deadlier. Entire systems turned into war zones. Massive space battles lit up the darkness. Thousands of ships clashing at once. Energy weapons cutting through shields. Explosions visible from entire planets. It was no longer a conflict. It was a galactic war. And in the middle of all this chaos, there was one species that didn't move. Humans. At the time, humans were still considered developing. They had spread beyond their homeworld. Built colonies. Established trade networks. Even created a modest defense fleet. But compared to the Velkari and Orinth, they were small. Insignificant. Most of the galaxy didn't expect anything from them. Until both sides contacted them. The messages were clear. Join us, the Velkari demanded. Fight with strength. Claim your place in the galaxy. The Orinth offered something different. Stand with us, they said. Be part of a system that brings order to chaos. Two choices. Two powerful allies. Two paths to survival. Humanity responded with one word. No. The galaxy didn't understand. You refuse both? A Velkari envoy asked. Yes. You choose isolation? The Orinth questioned. Yes. Humans closed their borders. Restricted access to their systems. Pulled their fleets back. No alliances. No support. No involvement. At first, No one cared. There were bigger battles to fight. More important enemies to destroy. But as time passed, and losses grew, that decision started to matter. Humans are wasting resources, Valkyrie leaders argued. They sit safe while we bleed. They disrupt balance, Orinth strategists said. They refuse to contribute to order. Slowly, the idea began to spread. Humans weren't neutral. They were a problem. They benefit from our war, one Valkyrie warlord said. They grow stronger while we weaken, an Orinth analyst added. And for the first time, both sides agreed on something. Humans couldn't be ignored. They will have to choose eventually, someone said. But humans didn't choose. They stayed silent, stayed hidden, stayed out of the war. And that silence started to feel dangerous. Because in a galaxy at war, anyone not fighting was unpredictable. And unpredictable things are feared. By the time the war reached its peak, with entire regions destroyed and both sides losing more than they expected, the focus began to shift. Not away from the enemy, but toward the one species that refused to fight. Humans. They think they're safe, a Valkyrie commander said coldly. They think they can stay out of this. The Orinth response was just as clear. No one stays out of a war like this. And that's when the idea was born. Not to recruit humans. Not to convince them. But to force them. Because if they wouldn't join the war, then the war would come to them. At first, no one said it out loud. The idea existed quietly, hidden inside war rooms, whispered in strategy meetings, passed between commanders who were tired of losing. Humans. They were still not part of the war. And that started to feel wrong. Months had passed since the conflict began. The Valkyrie Dominion had lost entire fleets trying to break Orinth defenses. The Orinth Collective had seen their carefully structured systems collapse under relentless Valkyrie attacks. Neither side was winning. They were just surviving and bleeding. In a Valkyrie war chamber, surrounded by holographic maps filled with burning systems and fading fleets, a commander slammed his fist onto the table. This war is draining us, he said. We conquer systems and lose them days later. We destroy fleets and lose our own. Another officer nodded. We need an advantage. The room went quiet, because everyone knew what that meant. Humans, someone said. The word hung in the air. Not powerful, not threatening, but important. They have resources, another officer added. Untouched systems, untapped energy, fresh fleets. And they're doing nothing with it, the commander said angrily. They refused our alliance, a third officer reminded them. Then they made their choice. Across the galaxy, in a completely different place, the same conversation was happening inside the Orinth Collective. They remain outside the war, an Orinth strategist said calmly. They observe. They grow. While we weaken. That is unacceptable, another replied. They were offered integration, a third added. They refused. Silence followed. Then, they cannot remain neutral. And just like that, both sides reached the same conclusion. Humans were no longer irrelevant. They were a threat. Not because they were attacking, but because they weren't. The first step wasn't war. It was pressure. Valkyrie ships moved closer to human borders. Orinth probes increased surveillance. Trade routes near human space were restricted. Messages were sent again. More direct this time. More aggressive. Join us, the Valkyrie demanded. This is your final chance. Align with order, the Orinth said. Or face the consequences of isolation. Humanity responded the same way. No. No explanation. No negotiation. Just no. That answer changed everything. Because now, it wasn't about alliance anymore. It was about control. They think they can ignore us, a Valkyrie warlord said, his voice filled with anger. They think they're beyond this war. They believe distance protects them, an Orinth strategist added. They are mistaken. And then, the unthinkable happened. For the first time since the war began, the Velkari Dominion and the Orinth Collective communicated directly, not to negotiate peace, but to agree on something else. A temporary alliance. Not against each other. Against humans. The meeting was short, cold, efficient. No tricks, the Velkari commander said. We eliminate them. Then we return to our war. Agreed, the Orinth replied. This is a strategic necessity. No trust. No friendship. Just a shared goal. Destroy human space. Plans were drawn immediately. The combined fleet would strike fast. Overwhelming force. No time for humans to react. Velkari warships would lead the assault, heavy firepower, direct attacks. Orinth vessels would support, advanced systems, energy disruption, precision targeting. Together, they would be unstoppable. No species has ever faced a combined force like this, one Velkari officer said. They will not survive it, an Orinth analyst confirmed. But even among them, there were doubts. Humans refused both sides, one junior officer said quietly. That means they're confident. Or foolish, another replied. They didn't even try to negotiate, the first added. Then they will learn, the commander said coldly. Within days, the fleet was assembled. It was the largest force ever created in that region of the galaxy. Thousands of ships. Velkari destroyers, massive, heavily armored, built for direct combat. Orinth cruisers, sleek, advanced, equipped with powerful energy manipulation systems. Support vessels, carriers, tactical command ships. A wall of power, enough to crush any civilization. As the fleet prepared to move, one final message was sent to humanity. Not a request, not a warning, a statement. You had your chance. No reply came. The commanders didn't care. Set course, the Velkari leader ordered. Target, human space. Engines ignited. Thousands of ships moved as one. A force so massive it lit up entire star systems as it passed. No hesitation. No doubt. Only certainty. They will fall quickly, one officer said confidently. They've never fought a war like this, another added. They don't even have the numbers, a third said. The Velkari commander nodded. Then this will be simple. But far ahead of them, inside human space, something else was happening. Not panic. Not fear. Preparation. Quiet. Precise. Humans had seen the fleet coming. Long before it reached their borders. They didn't send a warning. Didn't mobilize massive fleets. Didn't try to negotiate. They did something else. They waited. Back on the invading fleet, confidence remained high. No resistance detected at the border, an officer reported. Of course not, the commander replied. They know they can't win. Orders. Continue forward. The fleet crossed into human space. No alarms. No defenses. No battle. Just silence. They're not even trying, one officer laughed. Pathetic, another said. The commanders smiled. Victory felt close. Too close. Because none of them realized one thing. Humans didn't prepare for war. They prepared to end it. At first, it felt like the easiest victory of the war. The combined fleet of the Velkari Dominion and the Orinth Collective crossed into human space without resistance. Thousands of ships moved forward in perfect formation. Weapons charged, shields active, ready for battle. But there was no battle. No defense grid detected. No patrol fleets. No warning signals. The reports came one after another, each more confusing than the last. The Velkari commander stood at the center of the bridge, arms folded. They didn't even try, he said. The Orinth strategist beside him wasn't smiling. That's what concerns me. But the fleet continued, because stopping now would mean doubt. And doubt, in war, was dangerous. Advance, the command was given. The armada pushed deeper into human territory. Hours passed. Still nothing. The stars looked normal. Space looked empty. Everything appeared peaceful. Too peaceful. Something's wrong, an Orinth officer said quietly. Define wrong, the Velkari commander replied. Our systems are experiencing minor inconsistencies. Explain. Navigation data is slightly off. Coordinates don't match visual confirmation. That's a glitch, the commander said. It shouldn't be, the officer replied. Fix it. We're trying. The first incident happened minutes later. A Velkari destroyer, one of the largest ships in the fleet, suddenly changed direction. Not by command. Not by error. It drifted. Straight into another ship. The collision was massive. Both vessels exploded instantly. What just happened? The commander shouted. Navigation failure, an officer responded. That doesn't make sense, another yelled. Those systems don't fail. But they had. And that was just the beginning. Moments later, a group of Orinth cruisers opened fire. Not at an enemy. At empty space. No targets detected, the weapons officer shouted. Then why are they firing? The commander demanded. They're detecting hostile signals. Where? Everywhere. The battlefield was changing. Not physically, but perceptually. Ships began receiving different data. Different readings. Different realities. One ship saw clear space. Another saw enemies. Another saw nothing at all. Shut down external targeting systems, the Orinth strategist ordered. But it was too late. The fleet was losing coordination. Then, a human message appeared. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just clear. You don't understand how we fight. The message spread across every screen. Every ship. Every system. Locate the source, the commander shouted. No source detected. Impossible. But it wasn't. Because humans weren't broadcasting from a ship. They were everywhere. The next phase began instantly. Gravity shifted. Not dramatically. Not enough to crush ships. But enough to disrupt them. Formations broke. Ships drifted apart. Distances changed without warning. Stabilize formation, the commander ordered. We can't. Thrusters aren't responding correctly. Navigation is recalculating constantly. Panic spread. For the first time in this war, the combined fleet didn't know what to do. Because this wasn't combat. There was no enemy to shoot. No target to destroy. Only confusion. Then came the illusions. Sensors began detecting enemy fleets. Massive ones. Closing in fast. Enemy ships approaching. Prepare to fire. Weapons charged. Missiles launched. Energy blasts fired. And hit. Nothing. Targets gone. They were just there. No, they weren't. Ships turned on each other. Mistaking allies for enemies. Firing in panic. Explosions filled the void. And still, no real enemy appeared. This isn't war, the Orinth strategist said quietly. The Velkari commander looked at the chaos around him. Ships colliding. Weapons firing blindly. Systems failing. No, he replied slowly. This is something else. The human voice returned. Calm. Unshaken. You rely on strength. A pause. On numbers. Another pause. On control. The commander gritted his teeth. What do you rely on? He demanded. For the first time, there was a slight change in the voice. Not emotion, but certainty. Understanding. Suddenly, everything escalated. Entire sections of the fleet lost power. Not destroyed. Not damaged. Just offline. Ships went dark. Floating in space. System failure across multiple vessels. Why? No cause detected. The Orinth strategist's voice shook slightly. They're not attacking us. The commander looked at him. Then what are they doing? The answer came from the silence around them. They are controlling us. That realization hit harder than any weapon. Because it meant one thing. They were never in control of this battle. Not from the beginning. The human voice spoke one final time. This is your last chance. The fleet froze. Not physically. Mentally. Because they understood now. They weren't fighting humans. They were inside something far bigger. And whatever this was, it wasn't a battlefield. It was a system. One designed perfectly to end wars. And they had just stepped into it. By the time they understood what was happening, it was already over. The combined fleet of the Velkari Dominion and the Orinth Collective, once the most powerful force ever assembled, was no longer a fleet. It was chaos. Ships drifting without direction. Weapons firing at nothing. Allies turning on each other. Entire squadrons vanishing from formation. And still, no human ships in sight. This doesn't make sense, the Velkari commander whispered. For the first time, his voice wasn't filled with authority. It carried doubt. On the Orinth command vessel, the strategist stared at the data flooding his screens. None of it matched. Coordinates shifted every second. Signals overlapped. Time stamps contradicted each other. We've lost synchronization, he said quietly. What does that mean? Someone asked. It means, he paused, trying to process it himself. We are no longer operating in the same reality. That was when panic truly began. Retreat, a Velkari officer shouted. Yes, pull back. Regroup outside human space. Orders spread across the fleet. Ships attempted to turn. To escape. But escape wasn't simple. Because nothing was stable anymore. Navigation is failing. I can't find our entry point. Coordinates don't match anything. Every ship was trying to leave. But no one knew where out was. Then, everything stopped. Instantly. No warning. No transition. One moment chaos. The next. Silence. Weapons shut down. Engines died. Systems froze. Thousands of ships. Frozen in place. No movement. No control. Nothing. What just happened? Someone whispered. No one answered. Because deep down, they already knew. Humans had ended it. The darkness around them felt heavier now. Not empty. Watched. Controlled. Then, a message appeared. Not on one screen. On all of them. Clear. Simple. This war ends here. No anger. No threat. Just a statement. The Velkari commander clenched his fists. You think you can stop us? He said, his voice low but shaking. The reply came instantly. We already have. The Orinth strategist closed his eyes for a moment. He understood now. This wasn't an attack. It wasn't even defense. This was control on a level they couldn't compete with. What are you? He asked quietly. There was a pause. Then, the ones who chose not to fight. That answer confused some, terrified others. Because it didn't sound like weakness. It sounded like restraint. You stayed out of the war, the strategist said slowly. Yes. Why? A pause. Then, because we knew how it would end. Silence filled the bridge. The Velkari commander looked around. At his fleet. At the broken formation. At the helpless ships floating in space. And now? He asked. The answer came calmly. Now we make sure it ends. Across the fleet, systems flickered. Not shutting down. Changing. Weapons were locked permanently. Control systems restricted. Navigation reset. Not destroyed. Disabled. You're not killing us, one officer said slowly. No. Why? Another asked. A pause. Then, because dead enemies don't learn. That sentence hit harder than anything else. Because it meant one thing. This wasn't punishment. It was a message. Moments later, engines came back online. Not fully. Just enough. Systems, responding, the engineer said in shock. We can move. The fleet looked toward the commander. Waiting. He hesitated. Not out of fear. But realization. They had lost. Not in battle. But in understanding. Retreat, he said quietly. No one argued. The fleet began to move. Slowly. Carefully. Turning away from human space. And as they did, The distortion around them faded. The confusion disappeared. Navigation stabilized. Reality returned. Behind them, human space remained silent, untouched, unchallenged. As the last ship crossed the boundary, one final message appeared. Do not bring war here again. No threats. No warnings. Just truth. The signal ended. And this time, no one tried to respond. Days later, the combined fleet returned to their respective empires. Broken. Not physically. Mentally. They reported everything. Every detail. Every moment. At first, no one believed them. How could they? A war ended. Without a final battle? An entire fleet stopped. Without a fight? But the data didn't lie. The recordings proved it. And slowly, the truth spread across the galaxy. The Velkari Dominion withdrew from expansion. The Orinth Collective reduced military operations. The war that had consumed everything stopped. Not because of victory. Not because of defeat. But because of fear. Fear of something greater. Something that didn't fight wars, but ended them. And from that day on, every civilization remembered one thing. Humans didn't start the war, but if they ever stepped in again, they wouldn't just end it. They might end everything.